Our gospel lesson today comes from the book of Matthew, chapter 13, verses 31 through 33. Matthew, chapter 13, verses 31 through 33, and also 44 through 52. So Matthew, chapter 13, 31 through 33, and 44 through 52. He put before them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that someone took and sowed in his field. It is the smallest of all the seeds, but when it has grown, it is the greatest of shrubs and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and make nests in its branches. And he told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed in with 3 measures of flour until all of it was leavened. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in the field which someone found and hid. Then in his joy goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls. On finding one pearl of great value, he went and sold all that he had and bought it. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was thrown into the sea and caught fish of every kind. When it was full, they drew it ashore, sat down and put the good into baskets, but threw out the bad. So it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come out and separate the evil from the righteous and throw them into the furnace of fire, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Have you understood all this? They answered, yes. And he said to them, therefore, every scribe who has been trained for the kingdom of heaven is like the master of a household who brings out of his treasure what is new and what is old. The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
As I was reading this passage, I invented a new word. Parablepalooza. Parablepalooza. And I was reading this, it was like just parable after parable after parable after parable after parable. And it was like, wow, he's on a roll. He keeps talking and going with these parables, and this is all part of a larger passage here where he's going over all these different parables. He's got all these things linked together, and he's telling all of these stories. And as I was saying, I said, man, that's a lot of parables put together in one sitting. But then I realized, oh wait, we have a split in passages that we're reading. We do actually have a break between 33 and 44, but still, that's a lot of them to throw together in such that short time period. And I started thinking about the why. Why are these parables here? Why are there so many? Why is he giving us so much information? And I started thinking about the crowd he was with. Where Jesus is out preaching in front of a crowd. And in this crowd are people from all walks of life. You have Jews who are strict followers of the law. You have Jews which were partial followers of the law. You have Gentiles who didn't even know the law. You had priests and Pharisees and Sadducees. You had tax collectors. You had fishermen. You had farmers. You had homeowners. You had servants. You had rich people. You had poor people. You had men. You had women. You had a whole bunch of people from all walks of life. And as Jesus was presenting to them the kingdom of heaven, he was trying to explain the kingdom of heaven to each and every person on their level. He was trying to explain the kingdom of heaven to every one of them so that everybody knew, hey, I understand this kingdom of heaven is for me. And everybody knew, hey, I understand the kingdom of heaven is for everybody else too. You see, people learn many different ways. People learn in different styles. So that if you're a teacher, you have to learn multiple teaching styles, multiple ways of communicating out information to people so that everybody has an opportunity to learn the information and that everybody is included in the learning process. When I read this passage, I started thinking about math. started thinking about math, and I started making up numbers to give y'all. So I'm going to give you a math lesson today. But I want you to think about how you learned math. The numbers 486 and 318, if you add those together, 486 and 318, you will end up with the number 804. And you can probably check that in your head. Do it right now. The numbers are 486 and 318. You check that number in your head. Everybody's doing it right now. I see the eyes are closing and looking at me like. Now, as you can think about that number, it does end up to be 804. How many of you are doing this math go at the problem from right to left? You add up your numbers from the ones column, then the tens column, then the hundreds. That's probably how you were taught. Back in the day, ages and eons ago, at the dawn of civilization, I guess is what we call it. I guess that's what I call it. I don't know how long ago y'all did. But that's how it was taught. You add up your ones column first, and then you put the one on top. If you have an extra, like you have the tens or one or two, whatever it was, you move it over to the next line. Then you add up those numbers and the one up top. Then you keep moving over. You go from right to left. I'm going to do it this way so y'all can see it for your perspective. Well, back in the 80s, like prior to the 90s, that's the way math was taught. And sometimes you had little blocks and stuff that you could use in order to separate out, and you can actually see it visually. And you had the tens and the fives, you had the ones, and you had the big things of hundreds. I don't know if you had toys to play with to visually see how, when you add things, this is what it ends up with. And you had this block of 100, and you had 4 of those, and you had all those. So when you add the ones, 8 plus 6, of course, you have 14. And then 80 plus 10 is 90 plus another 10, that's 100. And you have 400 plus 300 is 800, so 804. Well, somewhere around the 90s, I guess, late 80s, early 90s, someone invented something called new math. New math. And the way they did new math is they went the opposite direction. They went from left to right. You read from left to right, why not solve these? So they solved the hundreds first, then they solved the tens, and then they solved the ones, and they just kind of add all that together. So they said, okay, well, you have 400 and 300, so that's 700. So we'll put 700 over here. Then you have 80 plus 10, well, that's 90. And then you have 8 and 6, that's 14. So we'll take the 10 there and add it to the 80 and 90. So you have 4 is your ones, and then you have your 890 plus 10, and that's 100. So you add that 100 to your 700, so you have 804. It's the same answer. They just went at it a different way. Well, sometime around the 2000s, another educational thing came through. It was called Common Core. And when Common Core came out, people thought that it was a different way of teaching information. But what really Common Core was the way of saying, okay, these are the skills we want our students to have by the time they graduate, and this is how we're going to approach it. And we're all going to be on the same page. We're going to teach kind of the same methodology in the same way. And what they did is they brought out these books called Common Core Math. In the Common Core Math book, they had a completely different way of approaching things in math. What they did is they took it and said, people like numbers that end in 5s and 0s better than anything else. So they said, well, we've got 486 and 318. But we're going to take that 386 and we're going to make it 486, we're going to make it 490. In order to get 490, of course, we're going to add 4 to that 6, and that gives us 490. But if we do that, we have to take away 4 from the other number. That leaves us with 312. So 314, sorry. Doing my math wrong. 4 from 8 is 4. So we got 314 and the other. Well, we'll just drop off that 4 for right now, because we can deal with that. 490 plus 310, well, that's 800. And we'll add the 4 in, that's 804. The exact same answer, 3 different ways. And the people, those of us who were old school math, were like, Common Core is stupid. I don't understand Common Core at all. And we blamed that new math style, that thing, on Common Core, even though Common Core didn't have anything to do with it, really. It was just another method of teaching math. They expanded that math teaching to include this whole rounding up business. And I'll tell you, when I do my math, that's how I do it. I try to find ways to bump numbers up to fives or zeros or like quarters. If I'm doing money and everything, I try to bring things up to quarters of amount or zero things out or 50 cents or something like that. Because it's easier for me to deal with those numbers than it is with like 17 and 23. Even though I know that's 40. Because I do that in my head really quickly because I'm measuring my numbers up to the zeros. But that's how people learned. You learned it one way, our children learn it another, and their children are going to learn another way. And it's all ways of learning. So when people were like complaining about this and they're saying, I don't understand this math just, why can't they do it the right way? And I said, well, they are doing it the right way from a different perspective. Because not everybody learns the same way. Not everybody has the same ability to crunch numbers the way you do. When people look at things, they like to make things as easy as possible for them, so they will do a little extra step here to make the numbers more manageable. It's all about visualizing numbers in your head. It's like when you're dealing with change, and someone hands you a 20, and you're looking at the amount of cost, like $18.62, you automatically will start, well, how do I get this up to 20? And you'll do your cents first in order to get it to even out to $1 and then move on from there. Or maybe not. Maybe you just look at punch the numbers into the cash register and it comes up with the number you need. Oh, that's what I got to do is 8, whatever it is. So I'm not going to do it right now. My brain's not. I've overcharged my brain with math. And you're probably thinking, why is he talking about math? This is like, I can't get this. It's so confusing. The reason I mentioned this is because when Jesus is giving all these parables, and he's doing this, he is speaking to a crowd of people who understand life from different perspectives, who understand things from different perspectives. When I play my guitar, I can play by ear. I listen to a song and I pick out the chords and I figure it out. Sometimes it's weird and I have to look up the chords on my app, but most of the time I can capo up and figure out chords at least in the basic level and whatnot. Some people, they have to get the chords and find it written down. They can't follow because they just don't know the chord progression or where things are going, or they can't look at somebody's fingers and say, oh, that's what that chord sequence is. I can't play piano because I really can't read music all that well. Used to. I only used to read the bass clef. Could read a little bit on top, not at the same time. I'm usually one or the other, so it doesn't come naturally to me. How many of you, when you are cooking, can taste something and instantly know what's in that, what ingredients you need to put together in order to make something taste similar to that? You're in a restaurant and you eat that bread from Outback, that brown bread they give you, and they say, oh, I know how to make that. They work up some concoction and make it. But some of you may need to have the recipe written out, and you have to go by the recipe and actually just do it as the recipe says. But me, I like having pictures when I see cooking done. So I may go to a YouTube video or turn on the TV to the cooking channel and watch someone prepare the food so I know I'm doing it the right way. Like, what's the best way to cut up these things? If you're talking about measuring out the flour, are you talking packing it in there and measuring it off, or are you just kind of pouring it in there and not patting it down? What are you doing to mix these ingredients together? What order they come in? Sometimes visuals, especially when you're working on a car. When you're working on a car, I don't know the difference between most of the components in a car. So I'll bring up a video which shows me how to repair something in a car and see whether or not it's easy enough for me to do or if I need to take it to a mechanic to do it. Some people can get a book that shows a diagram of what their car looks like and can build it from that. When I'm doing a computer and I'm doing teardowns, I can do that. They can say, well, remove all these things and get to this. Sometimes I need a picture to see what exactly they're talking about, but most of the time it's because I've done it so much, I know what things are. But we all learn different ways. That's why when you go to school, you go into the classroom, there are multiple ways of learning. There's a lecture. There's a lecture that explains things. They have a board where they write things up on the board so they can visually see what's going on. They send homework out so people can do the work on their own and practice. They have tutors, people who work together. They work people in pairs and groups. Sometimes they work individually on things. Homework hotlines that are available. All these different ways of reaching to these students to help them to learn the information. And as Jesus is standing out there, he realizes who he's standing out there with. He's got priests who understand the law. He's got simple farmers and fishermen who are out there just, they know their trade. He's got men and women. He's got farmers. He's got people who are poor, who understand the value of a treasure. He's got rich people who understand that, they are wealthy, but they're also included in all of this. And he gives them all of these different things. Kingdom of heaven is like the mustard seed, the smallest of seeds, but it turns into the largest of trees, and birds of everywhere come and gather into its branches. The kingdom of heaven is like a yeast. The woman will measure out and put 3 measures of flour into and to leaven it. And the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure that was found in a field, and someone found it and buried it up so nobody else would find it. They went out and gave everything up to buy that field. The kingdom of heaven is like a person looking for a pearl and finds that most beautiful pearl and spends everything they've got just to get that one pearl. The kingdom of heaven is like that net that goes out and gathers up fish of all kind. When I did that one, I was thinking, man, that's a big net. And what is the perspective of fish of all kind? I mean, are they catching carp from Japan? They got the big, huge tuna. Is there like a great white whale in there too? I mean, we got dogfish and catfish and all sorts of things. I think it was limited to what their perspective was. But still, if they looked around, they looked at that net and said it was catching fish of all kinds. The only thing that didn't get kept are the ones that were evil or bad or not good. And then he went to the audience there. He went to the people who were standing around there, and he says, do you understand all of this? And because he had thrown out so many parables, because he had thrown out so many examples, because he had went out and touched people from every walk of life, from every avenue, and he included that last thing about the net and saying everything, every fish be included. Do you understand that? And they all said yes. They all said yes. And then they realized that moment in time, not only did they say yes, but their neighbor said yes. That Gentile neighbor, that tax collector neighbor, that priest neighbor, that poor neighbor, the rich neighbor, the homeowner, the landowner, the servants, those who were knowledgeable in the law, those who knew nothing of it, those who came from a foreign nation and didn't really know what was going on, but they sat and they listened, they heard, and they felt included in all this. The strangers, the friends, the families, they all looked and realized that each and everybody else said, yes, we understand. Yes, we know the kingdom of heaven is for me. It wasn't selective. It was all inclusive. As long as you follow Christ, the kingdom of heaven is for you. As long as you do good and not evil, the kingdom of heaven is for you. And they all answered yes. We have all these parables here because it was Jesus' way of making sure that everybody knew they were included in this. It was Jesus' way of making sure everybody knew that he was talking to them on their level. He wanted everybody to understand that he was there for them. And he wanted everybody to understand he was there for everybody else. And so we have this large plethora of parables. A Parablepalooza to remind us. So when you go home today and you try to balance your checkbook, or you do your simple math, and you go home and you start preparing your ingredients for lunch, and you're either following the recipe, or you look at the recipe and say, well, I'm going to tweak it a little bit, or do the measurement so it fits not the servings of 15, but the servings of half of that, or whatever, or you just kind of concoct something of your own, or you're going home and you're going to do whatever it is that you do, whether you do it with a book or your own guidance or the guidance of something else. Remember that we all receive God in our own way. Remember that we all approach God from our own perspectives. And that we all are to receive Jesus Christ, no matter what walk of life we come from. We learned that from his Parablepalooza. We learned that because he spoke to each and every one of us where we are. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.